Hi, I'm Penny Smith, and I'm here at the Cheltenham Literature Festival for the first time. I have been boring people rigid about how I became a writer, an author specifically, not just a writer, because I became a writer when I was, probably 7 is when I first started writing. And then when I was 18, I got taken on as a cub reporter at the Peterborough Evening Telegraph. And from there I went to radio, and then local radio, and then local television, and etc., etc. And I've carried on writing throughout, always nurturing the hope that I was going to get my novel published. And I must have written about 7 before the first one that I wrote got published, which is coming up next. And I've just published my 3rd, which is called Summer Holiday. Oh my goodness, it is exhausting. I have to be on my own, which I find quite exhausting. I'm not a very solitary creature. I can bore people rigid by just going on and on and on, waffle. But when I'm writing, I have to sit there essentially on my own, conjuring up stories out of thin air. And I spend a lot of time just doing this. And then thinking about what happens next. And I'm not as rigid is the wrong word. I'm not as structured as perhaps I should be. It perhaps might be an easier existence if I actually sorted it all out first. But in fact, what I do is in a rather messy way, I just get through it. I just carry on and go, I haven't heard from such and such for a while. I'm going to see what they've been doing and what they've been up to, and then I press on. I mean, my books, I don't consider them to be. They will never win the Booker. They won't win the Costa Book Awards. They won't win an award, apart from, I hope, making people laugh. They're funny books, I hope, and I sort of design them to get through turbulence. I end every chapter on a bit of a cliffhanger, even if the cliffhanger is, will she cop off with that bloke? Will she manage to extricate herself from that terrible situation she's got herself into, or whatever? So I hope that people read them thinking, I wonder if I've got time for another quick chapter. And that's how they're kind of designed to be read. I don't really have a book that I like to read. I read everything. I read thrillers, I read biographies, I read autobiographies, I read children's books, everything. I don't have one particular book that I like. But when I'm going through turbulence, yes, I like a speedy read. I like something that keeps me occupied, to stop me biting my own arm off as the things fall out of the overhead compartments, as the stewardess flies past with the trolley exploding and the airline is upside down. I want to be able to have something that keeps me going. So that's when, as I said, I think my books come into their own. I have Pride and Prejudice is the book that I will, if I was cast on a desert island, I would take Pride and Prejudice. Or I might take a novelist who I'm not sure is still in print, a guy called Giovanni Goreski, who my mother introduced me to when I was 16 and I had the most terrible glandular fever, and for 6 weeks I didn't get out of bed. And she gave me this book, which was called The World of Don Camilo. And Don Camilo and Don Pepone live on the banks of the Po in Italy. And the book was written, I think, just after the Second World War. And they're little moral tales, but they're funny and witty. There's quite a lot of beating people up goes on, and people being forcibly fed with syrup of figs or things like that. But they're joyful. And Don Camilo talks to Jesus on the cross, and Don Pepone's the town mayor who's a communist and therefore not supposed to believe in God. And I don't know, it's just about relationships, friendships, small villages, and it's a joyful book.